counting and recounting the days passed over, uttering maledictions when the train stopped and accusing it of sluggishness, and mentally blaming Mr. Fogg for not having bribed the engineer. The worthy fellow was ignorant that, while it was possible by such means to hasten the rate of a steamer, it could not be done on the railway. The train entered the defiles of the Suptor Mountains, which separate the Candiche from Bundelkund, towards evening. The next day Sir Francis Cromarty asked Passepartout what time it is, to which, on consulting his watch, he replied that it was 3 a.m. This famous timepiece, always regulated on the Greenwich meridian, which was now some 76 degrees westward, was at least 4 hours slow. Sir Francis corrected Passepartout's time, whereupon the latter made the same remark that he had done to Fix, and upon the general insisting that the watch should be regulated in each new meridian, since he was constantly going eastward, that is, in the face of the sun, and therefore the days were shorter by 4 minutes for each degree gone over. Passepartout obstinately refused to alter his watch, which he kept at London time. It was an innocent delusion which could harm no one. The train stopped at 8 o'clock, in the midst of a glade some 15 miles beyond Rothal, where there were several bungalows and workmen's cabins. The conductor, passing along the carriages, shouted, "Passengers will get out here!" Phileas Fogg looked at Sir Francis Cromarty for an explanation, but the gentleman could not tell what it meant at a halt in the middle of this forest of dates and acacias. Passepartout, not less surprised, rushed out and speedily returned, crying, "Monsieur, no more railway?" "What do you mean?" asked Sir Francis. "I mean to say that the train isn't going on." The general at once stepped out, while Phileas Fogg calmly followed behind him, and they proceeded together to the conductor. "Where are we?" asked Sir Francis. "At the hamlet of Coby." "Do we stop here?" "Certainly. The railway isn't finished." "What? Not finished?" "No. It's still a matter of 50 miles to be laid from here to Allahabad, where the line begins again." "But the papers announced the opening of the railway throughout." "What would you have, officer? The papers were mistaken." "You sell tickets from Bombay to Calcutta," retorted Sir Francis, who was growing warm. "No doubt," replied the conductor, "but the passengers know that they must provide means of transportation from themselves from Colby to Allahabad." Sir Francis was furious. Passepartout would willingly have knocked out the conductor down, and did not dare look at his master. "We will, if you please, look about for some means of conveyance to Allahabad." "Mr. Fogg, this is a delay greatly to your disadvantage." "No, Sir Francis, it was foreseen." "What? You knew that the way—" "No, not at all. But I knew some obstacle or other would sooner or later arise on my route. Nothing, therefore, is lost. I have 2 days, which I have already gained, to sacrifice. A steamer leaves Calcutta for Hong Kong at noon. On the 25th, this is the 22nd, and we shall reach Calcutta in time." There was nothing to say to so confident a response. But it was too true that the railway came to a termination at this point. The papers were like some watches, which have a way of getting too fast, and had been premature in their announcement of the completion of the line. The greater part of the travellers were aware of this interruption, and, leaving the train, they began to engage such vehicles as the village could provide, 4-wheel plac-garis, wagons drawn by zebus, carriages that looked like perambulating pagodas, palanquins, ponies, and what not. Mr. Fogg and Sir Francis Cromarty, after searching the village from end to end, came back without having found anything. "I shall go afoot," said Phileas Fogg. Passepartout, who now had rejoined his master, made a wry grimace, as he thought of his magnificent but too frail Indian shoes. Happily, he too had been looking about him, and after a moment's hesitation said, "Monsieur, I think I have found the means of conveyance." "What?" An elephant that belongs to an Indian who lives but 100 steps from here." "Let's go see the elephant," replied Mr. Fogg. As soon as they reached a small hut near which, enclosed within some high pilings, was the animal in question, an Indian came out of the hut, and, at their request, conducted them within the enclosure. The elephant, which the owner had reared, not for beast of burden, but for warlike purposes, was half domesticated. The Indian had begun already, by often irritating him, and feeding him every 3 months on sugar and butter, to impart him with a ferocity not in his nature. This method being often employed by those who trained the Indian elephants for battle, happily, however, for Mr. Fogg, the animal's instruction in this direction had not gone far, and the elephant still preserved his natural gentleness. Kioni, this was the name of the beast, could doubtless travel rapidly for a long time, and, in default, or of any other means of conveyance, Mr. Fogg resolved to hire him. But elephants are far from cheap in India, where they are becoming scarce. The males, which are alone suitable for circus shows, are much sought, especially, but as few of them are domesticated. When therefore Mr. Fogg proposed to the Indian to hire Keone, he refused point-blank. Mr. Fogg persisted, offering an excessive sum of £10 an hour for the loan of the beast to Allahabad. Refused. £20. Refused. Also. £40. Still refused. Passepartout jumped at each advanced, but the Indian declined to be tempted. Yet the offer was an alluring one, for supposing it took the elephant 15 hours to reach Allahabad, his owner would receive no less than £600 sterling. Phileas Fogg, without getting in the least flurried, then proposed to purchase the animal outright, and at first offered £1,000 for him. The Indian, perhaps thinking he was going to make a great bargain, still refused. Sir Francis Cromarty took Mr. Fogg aside, and begged him to reflect more before he went any further, to which that gentleman replied that he was not in the habit of acting rashly, that a bet of £20,000 was at stake, and that the elephant was absolutely necessary to him, and that he would secure him if he had to pay 20 times his value. Returning to the Indian, whose small, sharp eyes glistened with avarice, betrayed that with him it was only a question of how great a price he could obtain. Mr. Fogg offered first 1,200, then 1,500, 1,800, £2,000. Passepartout, usually so rubicund, was fairly white with suspense. At £2,000 the Indian yielded. "What a price, good heavens!" cried Passepartout, "for an elephant!" It only remained now to find a guide, which was comparatively easy. A young Parsee with an intelligent face offered his services, which Mr. Fogg accepted, promising so generous a reward as to materially stimulate his zeal. The elephant was led out and equipped. The Parsee, who was an accomplished elephant driver, covered his back with a sort of a saddle-cloth, and attached to each of his flanks some curiously uncomfortable howdahs. Phileas Fogg paid the Indian with some banknotes, which he extracted from the famous carpet-bag, a proceeding that seemed to deprive poor Passepartout of his vitals. Then he offered to carry Sir Francis to Allahabad, which the brigadier gratefully accepted, as one traveller the more would not be likely to fatigue the gigantic beast. Provisions were purchased at Colby, and while Sir Francis and Mr. Fogg took the howdahs on either side, Passepartout got astride the saddle-cloth between them. The Parsee perched himself on the elephant's neck, and at 9 o'clock they set out from the village, the animal marching off through the dense forest of the palms by the shortest cut. End of Chapter 11. Read by David Russell. For Lit to Go. Available on the web at fcit.usf.edu.